Hi, this is Chris Converse, and in this episode, we'll create a grid layout within our content by reassigning HTML elements to display as a table, without actually using a table in the page. Then we'll remove those table properties, allowing us to reconfigure the layout for small screens. So if you'd like to follow along with me, download the exercise files, and let's begin by opening index.html in a text editor. And once you have the HTML file open, up in the head area, you'll see we have a link to style.css, which will open in a few minutes. Inside of the body area, we have a main article element. Inside of the article element is an H1, a paragraph, and a section element. It's this section element that we're going to convert into a table. And we're going to make all of the div elements, there are 4 inside of here, into the individual table cells. So the first thing we'll need to do in the HTML is group these so that we can create rows out of these individual divs. So what we're going to do is add a div tag around the first 2 divs and a second div tag around the second 2 divs. So let's get our cursor before the first div. I'll hit a return. I'll tab in here, add a beginning div tag. Then the next 2 divs, I'm going to tab these in just to indent them. And then after the first 2 divs, we're going to end the div we just added. Next line, let's add another div. Let's indent the next 2 divs. And then we'll close that second div. So now we have inside of our section element one div that contains the 2 original divs we started with, and a second div here which contain the 3rd and 4th divs we started with. And so with this in place, let's save our HTML. Let's open the index.html in a browser just to see what we're starting with. And now in the browser you can see the section element here. I've already added a white border and a 10% white background to this, but you can see all of the divs stacking up here. And so now let's go back to the exercise files. Let's find style.css. Let's open this in our text editor. Let's scroll down. You can see I have some rules in place. The first rule we're going to change is going to be the section selector down here on line 31. So after background color, let's come in here and add another property. We're going to set the property of display, and we're going to set this to a table. So now with this section element set to display as a table, let's scroll down. After the paragraph element that's being targeted inside of the section, let's hit a few returns before the media query, and let's target the first set of divs that are inside of the section. So we'll do that by typing section, then a space, then a greater than sign, then div. And so this will only target the first 2 divs in that section, which are the divs that we use to group divs 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Then let's add in our brackets. Let's split this open. And let's first set text align to center. And then next, let's set a display type. And we're going to set these to a table-row. Let's save our work. If we go back to the browser, we won't see anything different except for the fact that the text is being centered. So back in the CSS, after that section greater than sign div, let's come in here and target the divs that are inside of those top level divs. So section space greater than div, then a space, then another div, put in our brackets. Let's come in here and let's set a display type of table-cell. So with that in place, if you save your CSS and go back to the browser, we'll now see that the content is rendering inside of a grid. Now to visually illustrate what's going on here, we started with a section element, and that had 4 divs inside of it. We then grouped those inner divs into 2 sets of additional divs. Then in our CSS, we set the section element to display as a table, the immediate divs are set to table rows, and the divs inside of those divs are set to display as table cells, resulting in a 2x2 table, giving us a grid layout. So now back in our CSS, let's continue styling our table cells. So on the next line, let's set a width. We're going to set these to 50%. Next, we'll set a padding property to 15 pixels on all 4 sides. Then on the next line, let's set a border-left. We're going to set this to 1 pixel for the size, solid for the style, and then white for the color. So # and 3 Fs. And then I also want to set border bottom. So I'm going to duplicate the border left and then change this to border bottom. So with that in place, we'll hit save. You'll notice in the browser now that we have a doubling of our border on the left and bottom here because I have a border on the section element, and the cells inside on the left and bottom also have a left and bottom border. So let's come back to our CSS and let's turn off the left border and bottom border for specific divs. So let's start by targeting section, greater than sign, div, space div, then a colon. Let's target the first child. Put in our brackets. So for the first child, we're going to set border left to none. Then we'll come in here, select this entire rule, paste the rule down here. Now let's come in here and select the colon first child. Let's cut that from the div that's inside of the main div, and let's add it to the main div. And let's change first to last. Then we'll come down and change border left to border dash bottom. With those in place, let's hit save. Let's go back to the browser. We'll now see that the first child no longer has a border on the left, and the divs in the last child of the first set of divs no longer have a border on the bottom. So now we have an even 1 pixel border around the entire element and a 1 pixel border dividing all of the cells inside. So now with our grid created, let's remove the grid properties when our screen gets too small. So I have a media query in here for when the screen is under 600 pixels. So I'll change the width here in my browser to be less than 600 pixels. Let's come back to our CSS. I have a media query in here which is targeting a max width of 600. Let's add some returns inside. And inside of the media query, let's start by targeting the main section. So we'll type section, put in our brackets. For the main section, we're going to set border bottom to none. That's going to take off the border on the main element here. Back to our CSS. Next, we're going to target the divs that are immediately inside of the section element. So section space greater than div. Put in our brackets. For these items, we're going to set the display type to inline. Then on the next line, we're going to target all of the divs that we're using as table cells. So section greater than div space div. Put a space. Let's add our brackets. Let's give ourselves some room. First property is going to be the width. We're going to set this to inherit. This is going to override the 50% width we added earlier. Next property, we're going to set the display type to block. Next property, we're going to set border left. We're going to set this to none. Next line, we're going to set border bottom. We're going to set this to 1 pixel, solid, with a color of white, so a pound sign and 3 Fs. Then finally, we'll set the text align to left. Scroll up here a little bit. Save your CSS. Let's go over to the browser. Let's hit reload. We can see all of our styles taking effect. We do see that the last 2 divs in the last child main div do not have the border bottom because we overrode those earlier. So again, back to our CSS. Let's add one final rule. We'll type section greater than div colon last child space div. Put in our brackets. Let's split this open, and we need to add our border bottom property back in. So let's come up here and copy it from the divs inside of the main divs. Let's paste it down here, hit save, go back to the browser, and now the 2 divs inside of the last child main div have border bottoms as well. So now we have a section of our content displaying in a grid on larger screens using table display properties without using table elements in our HTML file, allowing us to rearrange the layout for small screens. And so with that, I'll conclude this episode, and as always, thanks for watching.